but like come from stories we know, like Lord of the Rings or something. Mm-hmm. This might be my favorite sequel ever.
All of the cockpit scenes are all practical.
Because John Hamm to me is like society telling men, you can't be that masculine. That's too dangerous. You can't do it. And Tom Cruise breaks protocol, steals a plane, and
steals a multi-million-dollar plane that they can't fly anymore because he got so much G-force bent the metal. I mean, who played Goose? Did the guy who played Goose, is that his father? Because I would not be surprised.
Because that was so perfect.
The stash and the shirt, like so just good. Like bring it all together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Real Steak, a podcast all about diving into the meat of movies. Mm-hmm. We are here to analyze some of the themes, the philosophies, the magnificence that comes with cinema these days. And sometimes it's just really easy to look at all the pretty things, but sometimes they're really saying something. And we're here to get
to the substance.
The substance.
The protein.
We're not here to put sauce all over everything. We're getting down into the meat of the movie. So my name is Jesse Mayer. I'll be your host, and I can't do this podcast without my wonderful co-hosts, Zach Peak.
Hi.
And Chase Nelson.
Hey.
Why did you do a creepy voice? Hey, come on over.
You sound like a sports announcer. I'm going to be the like jazz radio guy.
Ooh, nice and slow.
Hey. Yes.
Hey. So what movie, for those who are not watching the YouTube feed, what movie did we just go see?
We just went and saw Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. Top Gun Maverick after what, 33 years?
36,
36 years.
I heard 36, yeah.
Someone can Google that while we're listening.
It was 86 when the first one came out.
36-year gap.
Which was 8 years before I was born.
Oh, my gosh. We have come back to Top Gun. Let's do first impressions. The presentation of this steak. How was it? First impressions.
Oh, this steak was the perfect medium rare. That's how I like mine. It was like a like filet mignon. This was a great steak. It was top notch. The outside was perfect. The inside, it's a Top Gun movie. Top Gun's a little bit blunt. It's not some subtle artistic piece, but it was great. I loved it. I fairly enjoyed that meal.
I think filet mignon's a terrible steak, but I know it is a nice steak, so I'll give it
I don't know cuts, so just tell me what's
good. This is a ribeye, because this is delicious.
Okay, I like it.
It's got some fatty marbles in there, give it some flavor.
Or tri-tip, I don't know, whatever. It is good.
Our rating system's going to vary wildly through this podcast, so if you want something concrete that makes sense every time you hear it, you are going to be very disappointed in this podcast.
This movie is easily like a good like prime, like USDA prime. It's probably not like it's not the Wagyu.
Wagyu.
Or the Kobe. It's not either of those.
But it's primo.
Oh, it's
primo.
This movie is a 10 out of 10. This movie is so good.
This is like the perfect American movie. Which
I
feel
seen
like all those other steaks are like foreign steaks. This is the perfect American movie.
Yeah, Dune aside, because I was waiting for that for so long, and I'm going to exclude that. I haven't seen a movie this good in so long. It was like a breath of fresh air.
All right.
Start to finish.
Okay.
Excellent.
Fair enough.
I would agree. I was literally could not take my eyes off this movie the whole time. It was doing
so good.
So I went in, I prepped, I rewatched the original Top Gun, and then it was better, way better than the first Top Gun. I'm hot taking right now. I think this is better than the original Top Gun.
That's a pretty hot take, but I did have a similar thought. I didn't think it was better, but I thought, because I love the original. I watched it like a week ago, and that movie still holds up when you watch it.
It does.
Just as good. Like
it's very grainy these days.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's so fun. And this movie was the same. It was really good. It was really fun. And it held up to like the energy of the first one, really, and on purpose. Like they obviously do a lot of callbacks.
Yep.
The whole intro sequence is basically an entire callback. I walked back and I'm like, are we just rewatching the first Top Gun?
and I don't remember how the first one does. The first one end with those like their little headshot clips with the names of the actors and the character name.
I turned it off before the credits.
I think the first one did that too.
I think it ends the same way. I think it was pretty close to it was very, they were like, you know what, let's just do Top Gun and update it. Like it's the same movie. But I'm with Jesse. I think this was a much better movie. I understand if there's sentimental value, or if you want to give Top Gun credit for being new and something very different when it came out. If you want to give it credit for that, I think that's totally fair. But as a movie, I thought the story, the character development, it was just so good.
Well, and here's some things. Part of the reason I think this was so good was, okay, so Tom Cruise specifically doesn't really do sequels, right? And he was been...
Wait, what?
Unless you count Mission Impossible, which
Have
we
you
just
heard
saw a
of Mission
preview for.
Impossible?
But Mission Impossible is like the one, right? Like
Okay.
he doesn't come back to stuff. He's like, I'm moving forward.
Was there no
That's why
sequel
he
to Benjamin Button?
That's why he runs this way, is because he's always running forward to his next movie. Okay,
Okay, fair enough.
He was waiting for the perfect story and for the technology to exist that they could do this. So here's something you guys may not have known. Every flight sequence, all of the cockpit scenes are all practical. They all actually happened in the air. There's no green screen. They did not reshoot on green screen. They had to wait until they could create cameras and work with the Navy to put them in the cockpit.
Wow.
So cool.
And the actors were responsible for starting and stopping the cameras, and the director had no idea what they were capturing while they were up there. They were just up there, and then they had cameras mounted on the outside of the plane so they could get all of those all those shots of the planes from the exterior, all real. There's no CGI planes in this.
Which they were incredible to look at.
Phenomenal.
It was so good.
And so then on top of that, all of the actors had to go through 3 months of training on how to be in a plane. So
Like the G-force and stuff. Yeah.
So they did I think they did a month with the Navy, and then Tom Cruise built his own training program.
Oh, yeah, of
for
course he did.
3 months they went through to prep for this movie. So part of the reason this movie is so phenomenal is because it's not CGI garbage, which I love CGI.
Yeah.
But it's like, you can feel that it's real. Like, you look at it and you're like, man, this feels really good. Why does this feel really good? It's because it was all real. They did all those maneuvers. No, obviously the actors are not flying the planes, but all of the maneuvers you see happened.
Yeah.
And it is phenomenal.
I have another reason why they might have waited so long.
What is that?
Because they had to wait for Miles Teller to
Come
of age, because
Oh my
he
gosh.
is a perfect son of Goose.
I mean, who played
Like-
Goose?
Son of Goose.
Did the guy who played Goose, is that his father? Because I would
dude.
not be surprised.
Because
The
that was
stash
so
is
perfect.
The stash and the shirt,
So
just
good.
bring it
Yeah.
So
all
good.
together.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've given our initial impressions. We've talked about some hot takes. Let's dive into why this is so good. Besides just the fluff of nostalgia, the practical effects which were very good. The Danger Zone theme that they turned
my
into an
gosh.
instrumental track that was orchestral in the background that would just play randomly, and you're like, why do I feel like I need to be moving on this instrumental track? It's because it's Danger Zone, just orchestral
I
version.
drove my minivan home so fast.
listening to the orchestral version of Danger Zone.
No, just the wind.
The wind.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into some of the themes. Let's explore some of the themes that this movie presents. So, do you want to kick us off, Zach?
Yes, but I have a quick question.
Yes.
How do we want to do spoilers for this? Because it's a new movie. I would prefer we just, listen to this after you've seen it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Let's just
Spoiler
do
alert.
Spoiler alert.
We're gonna dive into themes and ideas.
We're gonna
and
talk about
different
everything.
stuff.
Yeah.
And we need to kind of be able to talk about all of it. So
if
spoiler alert.
if you haven't seen it, pause right now.
Go
keep
to
us
the-
in your
run
little
to your theater.
halfway
Yeah.
played. Go see it and then come back immediately after it's washed over you and you fully process the
Yeah.
amazingness you saw. So,
Okay. So kick us off with the first thing we want to talk about.
Well, I thought they did a great job with the story here. And Top Gun, the original, has a good story to it.
It's a little light.
It's a
in
little
my
light.
opinion.
No,
but
I would agree, but I think it's good enough. I
Yes,
think
it's serviceable.
the first Top Gun and this Top Gun as well, but not as much. They're blunt instruments. They're not some subtle artistic movie. They're not something like, you have to notice this. Like Jesse and I saw a movie years ago called The Green Knight, and
Yes.
I found a YouTube thing where there's just so much symbolism and all this. This is not that movie. This is a pretty blunt object. But the story was really good, and I thought they did a really great job of showing. One of the themes that I picked up on that I liked was Tom Cruise trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that his best friend's son, who his best friend died with him, you know, in training while flying.
Spoiler for original Top Gun.
Look, if you need to
All is
spoiler
lost
alert
on you if you don't know that.
for a 36-year-old movie, man, I can't help you. I don't even know why you're listening to this podcast at that point.
Yeah.
But you know, so this kid is a top fighter pilot, and he's not a kid, but he's a kid to Tom Cruise's character, and he's seen him grow up. He says at one point in the movie, I've tried to be a dad to him in some ways. I tried to care for his mom and respect his mom's wishes as to her son, you know, and now he's a great pilot, but he's conservative and he has some drawbacks, and he really has to figure out a way through all that, you know, through his own guilt, because you can see in the movie, he hasn't forgiven himself. He hasn't let that weight off his chest still. And so he has to figure out how to try to be a surrogate father for his best friend's son. For, you know, if in the first one, you see they really care and love each other. You know, Tom Cruise and his, you know, Maverick loves Goose and his whole family. You know, they have a great relationship. And then Goose dies during, you know, these training exercises, and it's not really Maverick's fault. And they mention, you know, he's cleared of everything in the, you know, from the incident and everything, but he still just takes it on himself.
Survivor's guilt too.
Yeah, he's got some survivor's guilt, and he's like, this guy had a family, and I'm just, you know, off going crazy, flying planes fast. So,
Well, and the end of Top Gun shows him throwing Goose's dog tags into the ocean, where it's like, oh, I've gotten over this. I no longer have guilt over this, but it's like this movie cuts in 30 years later, and they're like,
yeah.
He's still struggling with this. But I think it's, to even expound on that more, I would say this is almost more of an accepting responsibility thing, right? He's like, he's taken this guilt of, he's realized Goose's death is not his fault necessarily, but he now feels this responsibility for taking care of his son and being that father figure,
is
right?
such a true thing, because in communities, there's been research, and they've showed that if a boy loses his father, you know, or if a boy doesn't have his father around or something like that, that sets him on a very bad path. It's very difficult for that boy to grow into a young man and overcome that. But a boy can lose his father and turn out okay if there are men in the community that reach out to him and care for him and help him and are kind of icons. And you know, maybe there's no one that he's super close to as a father, but he's got a number of them. And I think that's kind of, you know, like you said, it may not be his fault. You know, it may not be that, you know, he needs to blame himself, but he does have a responsibility, you know, because this was his best friend, and he cared for this guy, and he cared for this family, and, you know, that family lost a father. And so it's kind of his duty, his responsibility to step up and care for this young boy. And then as he grows into a man and becomes a fighter pilot.
Yeah, and we see Tom Cruise even in fact try to almost overprotect him, right? Because there's a whole plot point where he takes Rooster, Goose's son, Rooster's paperwork out of the Naval Academy, and it sets
application
him back,
for flight school.
Yeah.
So it sets him back. What did he say? 4 years, something like that.
Because he would have gone to the Naval Academy for college and been able to start working on his pilot stuff in college.
Right.
Instead, I'm guessing he said 4 years because, you know, either he got in another program or he probably went to school or something. His mom was probably like, you got to go to school.
Right.
You know, so he probably went to college somewhere, and, you know, that's 4 years that he wasn't able to be in the pilot program.
Yeah. So almost overcompensating in his responsibility. Chase, thoughts on this idea of accepting responsibility or anything of that nature?
I had different thoughts.
Go ahead. Share.
I'll read you guys something, then I'll try to make this coherent on the fly. So this made me think of some Jordan Peterson stuff.
Okay.
He talks about being dangerous.
Okay.
He says a good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. And let me go to my other page. He says it's very helpful for people to hear that they should make themselves competent and dangerous and take their proper place in the world. There's nothing to you otherwise. If you're not a formidable force, there's no morality in your self-control. If you're incapable of violence, not being violent is a virtue. And it's kind of like they tie into like the martial arts kind of teaching where they teach you to be violent, and they teach you to be competent, and they teach you to have self-control. And this ties into, I mean, back to the original movie, the famous quote where he's like, I don't like you, you're dangerous. He's like, I am dangerous. Yeah. And then we fast forward into this movie, and he's still that like dangerous maverick that he's famous for. But what's really cool in this movie, well, first thing in the beginning, they tell him that quote where they cancel him from his program and they send him to Top Gun school again, like almost like out of, you know, it's begrudging, it's like almost spite. and they say they're talking about like drone technology, and they're like, your kind's going extinct, and he's like, not yet.
Not yet.
And I love that, because to me this movie was it was a refreshing take on real like masculinity in our culture. And it made me think of that Jordan Peterson stuff, because he's dangerous, but what's really cool about this movie is you see him, he has it under like absolute control.
Unlike the first one where he's a little more...
The first one, he kind of does, but they don't
see it.
You're not really sure yet, because he's kind of like this younger pilot. And so you know, that plays out in that movie, right? But it is kind of like, is he going to get someone hurt, you know, and all that. But in this one, he's competent. He's still dangerous. He's pushing limits. You know, he pushes that plane like past 10 Gs.
Yeah.
And he's like, and what's really cool, he's like, he's keeping himself at a captain. And you know, coming from the military, that would be like a really negative thing, like not progressing in rank and achieving. But he talks about, he knows who he is, and that's who he is. And being a captain, it's like, because he gets to be an aviator, a pilot, and and he knows that's who he is. And so that's where he's competent. That's where he's dangerous, but he has it, you know, under full self-control. And that plays out through the whole movie. Yeah. And he redeems himself in the eyes of all his naysayers throughout the movie. And I saw that as, you know, you don't see it in movies so much, where they usually have to like downgrade masculinity with maybe like a female character or something, which another thing in this movie is the female characters were not that. There's a female pilot, but they don't, there's no,
they don't make her a
crazy,
man, and they don't make
her. They do a good job of it, because there are female pilots and they're awesome. It's totally something a female can do in the military well. But yeah, to me, I saw this huge masculinity theme that was refreshing, because I thought it was glorifying it, showing you what good masculinity is, being dangerous, being competent, and having it under self-control. Yeah, to the benefit of others.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That was one of the themes that I kind of picked up on too, is it wasn't like all of his, to kind of combine the two themes we've talked about, it's like him accepting responsibility for Rooster is this masculinity, right? He's going and he's like, I have something to contribute. I am stepping up as a father figure, where it's like recently in cinema, the man's basically always an idiot, right? Like they've really made men these lousy, lazy father figures, or they're just incompetent.
They're all Homer Simpson or Ray Romano, you know, they're doofuses.
Right. And this movie was like, no, I have something to offer as a man. There's something I can do, and I'm accepting my responsibility as a man to help take care of this boy that is becoming a man. I'm able to use my strength. I mean, he says, Tom Cruise gives this quote where he's like, I'm a fighter pilot. Like, that's who I am. It's who I am in my soul. I don't know how to, he's like, I don't know how to teach that or make someone else that, but it's who I am, right? And it's like, he's identified who he is. And like you said, he understands where his power is. He knows he can be dangerous, but he, like you said, I thought that was super insightful, that he has that danger under control. He never puts someone else in danger, but he is always, you know, there's constantly this theme of it's not the plane, it's the pilot in the box. They keep saying this, and
guy
it's
in
like
the box.
And he's like, and that's very much the same thing. He's like, it's not about like it's not your gender, right? It's like who you are and what you decide to do with it. And he really, you know, shows masculinity in a really powerful way in this movie.
It's, you know, going off what Chase said and what you just said, I loved that in the first movie. I think I'm going to disagree with Chase a little bit. I think he is reckless, and he starts off, and I think, you know, you mentioned it's like, is he?
Well, it's kind of an unknown, and
it's an unknown. But he starts off that movie reckless, and he's awesome, but he's reckless. And what I loved about this movie is he took all of that just intuitiveness and incredible skill for flying, and he's just insane. One of my favorite scenes is, you know, the Iceman. He dies. You know, he's got throat cancer. You know, he's always kind of protected Maverick because he did go up the chain. You know, he did take every step. He did the progression and became admiral of the entire Pacific Fleet, which is pretty cool.
And they said you should be like a 2-star admiral by now.
Like, that's what Maverick should have been. But Maverick was like, I want to keep flying. But Ice went up the progression, and Ice, you know, they became great friends. You know, they've been friends for 35 years now. And so Ice always protected him. And that Ice is the one who got him into Top Gun. But then Ice passes away because he has cancer. And just as, a couple notes, I thought they respected the characters so well. Because so many sequels, I can't tell you how much I got frustrated by the Star Wars sequels where Luke Skywalker, who is the hero, who grows through 3 movies, like, peace out. I made a mistake, so I'm leaving. I give up.
Right.
And it killed the character for me. I'm just like, that's not a man at all.
Oh, laser sword?
Yeah, so he leaves because he made a mistake with, Ben, and everything. No, that's not a man to me. But this respected Ice, he passed away because of throat cancer, and that's what happens sometimes. It wasn't like kill him off, get him out of here. It was a progression that happens. But then they take Maverick off leading the team. Maverick's supposed to be teaching these kids or these pilots, these younger pilots, who are the best of the best, and they take him off the team. And they're like, you're not going to be the teacher anymore. This guy comes in, he's very conservative. The new guy who's going to teach, he's going to get everybody killed. Everybody can see that if you're watching the movie. And then they're briefing and they're talking about how they're going to go slower. And they're like, well, you don't have to fly as fast or low to the ground and all this stuff that's more dangerous, but makes it feel safer, but it's actually more dangerous. And there's the plane appears on the radar. And they're like, what's that?
Yeah.
And it's just like, Maverick requesting green for range. They're like, I don't see you scheduled, but yeah. He's like, and then he lowers the time. So instead of this guy's going to increase it, say, oh, you have more time. It's safer. It's okay. He's like, no, it's more dangerous. I'm going to lower the time. And he just crushes it. And you see all of that skill that you saw in the first movie has had 35, 36 years to just build and become competent and still be dangerous. But
He's showing him what a man's capable of.
But yes, and it's so good because instead of making him, oh, it's been 30 years and he's a drunk or, he's fallen off and he needs to come back. It's like, no. This guy has spent 30 odd years refining his skill and he pulls off the run. He does everything perfectly. And it's funny because that's going to happen when that scene starts. You're like, oh, it's
so good.
You're on the edge of your seat. You're like,
my gosh.
Let's go.
That was the scene I meant to tie back to, and it slipped my mind as I was going through it because that scene was so awesome. He's like, because John Hamm to me is like society telling men, don't be
that's
too.
Who plays the new guy?
He's the commander.
Yeah,
and he's like overseeing the program, but he's like, to me, he's like society saying, you can't be that masculine. That's too dangerous. You can't do it. And Tom Cruise breaks protocol, steals a plane, and
steals a multi-million-dollar plane that they can't fly anymore because he got so much G-force it bent the metal.
But then he flies through that course and he puts on a full display of what a man in his full competency is capable of for all these young guys looking up to him, trying to learn from him. And then all of a sudden, they've been kind of mocking him a little bit. He's the old guy and they're all at the top of their game, rightfully so. But he's there to teach them something else and break them out of this shell that they're trying to be contained in by this figure.
Well, he talks about you know the limits of your plane, but you don't know your limit.
Yeah.
And they don't know your limits.
It's a powerful message. It's awesome.
It was, oh man, that scene still just
they nailed it.
It was perfect. And I loved that because, everything you said about being a man, but also how many of our sequels or things that are rebooted or things that are taken now, the guys are just like buffoons or like you guys were saying. And instead of taking a beloved character, like that's what I think they did to Luke Skywalker. And that's personally why my opinion on the new Star Wars is they weren't great, is I couldn't stand they did that. And I know a lot of ink has been spilled. We'll talk about that on a later pod, I'm sure. But it was just so refreshing and awesome to see. They're like, you know what Maverick is now? He's the best. He's
still the best.
He cares. He's just, this is what he is. This is who he is, which, the identity. And he's going to rip it. He's just
found his
so,
final
so
form.
good.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to tie it back to, you were talking about Ice, and I think there's a very powerful expression of masculine relationships there too, because it's like you see this friendship, like they're texting through most of the movie. You just see Ice kind of texting me. He's like, hey, what are you going to do about... You
don't see that you don't know he has throat cancer for a while.
See them texting.
So you just see the texting. You're like, why are they just texting? But yeah.
And Ice is like, Tom basically is like, oh, why did you sign me up for this? This is stupid. I shouldn't be doing this. And he's like, they need you. And you wouldn't have come if I did tell you in advance, right? And then it's like later he's like, hey, I need to see you. And he's like, now's not a good time. And he's like, that's an order. And like basically he's like, you need to shut up and get over here. And there's this very emotional scene where they're sitting in his office, and it's like almost a 7-8 minutes long scene. And Val Kilmer doesn't say anything until the last minute because he's typing on this computer, but he knows Maverick's hesitancies. You see this friendship that's grown over all these years of them being a wingman, and he's like, he doesn't have to say a lot. He types a couple sentences in the computer, and Maverick basically goes through a whole self-discovery process by Ice just basically just giving him gentle nudges. He's like, you need to let go. You need to, And
there's that one part of that where he had typed just let it go, and he responds to it, and then he pauses and he looks at the screen again, and then he keeps going. Like,
even Val Kilmer just kind of like points at the screen.
Yeah, he's just like, there you go, there it is. Look at it.
And then the moment, it's just so amazing because then the last thing you hear him say before he leaves is he's like, the Navy needs Maverick. Those pilots need Maverick. And I think there's so many times in our lives we and we've been talking a lot about masculinity here, but us as a whole need to just hear we're needed and we're wanted. And there's so many things in the world these days that tell us you have no value, or your life doesn't matter, or only certain lives matter. And it's like having someone beside you, whether that's a spouse or a friend, going, this world needs you.
And who you are.
It needs
who you are is so important because that's who Maverick is.
And that's
He's a Maverick.
And that's how God designed us, right?
Yeah.
Like God gives us inherent value. This is just, and again, you can pull some parallels down where Ice is basically saying, I, as a higher figure, am showing you how much value you have right now, right? And we can take that as the same thing that God gives us in saying, I believe in you and you have value, right? And so I just thought that was amazing. I thought the Ice stuff was done really well. He does pass away. There's a very emotional scene of Maverick burying him, and it's a very powerful depiction of friendship and what friendship and relationships can do in spurring you on.
And I loved that. Those guys loved each other. And I feel like with homosexuality and transgenderism and everything, like talking about guys loving each other is such a weird, difficult thing to talk about now. And they just showed it perfectly. It's two men who love each other, respect each other deeply. You can tell they have so much respect for each other. At the very end, Ice makes a little joke, and like lightens the mood, and it's funny, but it's serious. And it was just a great depiction of a close, genuine male bond, which I think we need more examples of, because I don't know how many guys know how to have friends and how have guys that they're really close with and they love, but it's not like something
but we'll
weird.
Speak truth to them when they're being
and also speak truth, and also guide them and stuff. And it's interesting how much guidance Maverick has through this. Maverick, his love interest. Tom Cruise movies always got to have a love interest, and his love interest, which was really cool, is like we talked about how they didn't really emphasize like a feminine character to be feminine or be awesome because she's a girl or anything. But the women in it are just wise and smart, and they're not overbearing. They're not, jerks or arrogant or anything, but they're like, you can get through this. You can figure it out. I know you. I know you've got this. And they're encouraging and wise and helpful. It's really cool to see that too.
Yeah, I see. I mean, the love interest is confident. She knows what she wants. She sets boundaries for herself, and she owns her own bar and is playful with her femininity. She's not trying to be a man. She's just being a strong woman. And then Phoenix, who's the female pilot in the group, also strong. She's not trying to be one of the guys. She's powerful in her own body.
Well, she is. I mean, she is kind of arrogant because they all are. They're all these like hotshot pilots, and she's just like them.
But it's not a like, I'm better than you because I'm a woman. She's just like, she's confident in her skills. There's a power in that confidence, right?
And they could have easily done that. So many movies do it.
Yeah.
And you're almost just used to it. So like they could have totally got away with that. And the fact that they didn't do that, I just respected.
Her more because
she was cool.
Yeah, it made the character way more likable.
Well, and they didn't drop into the thing where it's like they could have had a whole subplot of you're overlooking me because I'm a woman or whatever. And it's like, no, she was literally on the list from the beginning to go run this mission because of her skills and qualifications and nothing else.
If this was Star Wars, she would have been in Hangman's position at the end. And she would have come in and killed all 3 planes.
Yeah. Well, so at the end, like they're facing off against the next generation of fighters, and they're trying to figure out how to destroy him and everything. And this guy, who the entire movie, he's the cocky, arrogant guy. He's like what Ice was in the original, and he comes in and saves him. And so Chase is saying if they did it the other way, is instead of Maverick taking out 2 planes and then
getting
so
saved
this
on
guy
the last
getting saved
one.
on the very last one, he's out of everything. He's done everything he can, and he's
They're gonna
stretched the plane
die.
to the max. Yeah, like, but he's been competent.
Yeah.
He's taken out
Yeah.
2 of these incredible
He did
aircraft.
everything perfectly.
in an
Yeah.
F-14.
Yeah, and but what would happen if if they went the route of most movies? The girl would show up, just destroy every plane there is,
Yeah.
win the entire day, and it was really cool.
Yeah, while they were like petering out the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
just trying to hang on.
Yeah.
It's so good. That reminded me of something I was thinking about, and did you notice? I don't think they ever said what country they were attacking.
Nope.
They
And
did
it
not.
was- they
They
kept
left
it ambiguous.
intentionally
They kept-
ambiguous to not upset anybody, probably.
Well, but it was cool.
Yeah, I actually liked it, and I couldn't remember. I know there was the whole Taiwan patch thing that got kind of China's hackles up.
Oh, yeah.
and helped to delay this awesome movie from us. And so I don't know if there was any original country that it was supposed to be that also got changed, but I did kind of like it, and even tying into the theme that we were talking about, where they have this enemy, but they left it ambiguous, so it could kind of be anything. Like you don't know who you're preparing for, but it's out there, and
And it doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. Yeah,
The movie's not about who they're fighting.
Yeah.
The movie's about the pilots.
yeah.
And It's about
I
Maverick.
thought
and
it
the
made the
characters.
movie better.
Yeah, it
Well,
did.
and I think the other thing I really enjoyed too was that this movie really honors fighter pilots and people who choose to serve, right? Like even the guys, I will say, like even the guys that are just like not just the guys that work the deck that just launch the planes and receive the planes, like they looked cool. Even like everyone gets their due, and it's like there's this thing where lately it's felt like people like cops and firefighters and all these guys have been getting so much like criticism and all of this downtroddenness, and this like celebrates people who choose to serve, right? Like people who are out there risking their life for their country or to protect people. This movie really celebrates them, and it's like this is the things that they're going through, and it's not like they're terrible people, or they just are so reckless and a waste of time, which is what a lot of movies are doing. They're bad people that are just there to murder people. It's like these guys, like it's a celebration of these fighter pilots that go through all of this stuff. I thought it was really cool.
And it was a cool theme because the movie in its on the nose kind of plot points really values their lives, because the whole plot of the mission they're training for and that they complete is basically a suicide mission. They until Tom Cruise shows them that it can be done, but even then he pushes like 10 G's in that older F-18 at the end, in the end of that
F-14.
scene.
Yeah.
No. I mean,
the first
when
one.
he does that run,
When he does the
215
really
run.
great run
to
and
show him
shows
that
who
it can
he
be
is.
done,
Yeah.
he pulls 10 G's like he did in the very beginning of the movie with that prototype plane up in the atmosphere, just going straight, and they're all just like left speechless. But they're doing this suicide mission, and then the whole time, he's harping on him. He's like, "We're keeping them alive." Like that's John
what we
Hamm like
have to
leaves
do.
that out, and he said, "No, and keeping them alive."
That is a priority.
And yeah, in so many movies, it's okay. It's not the worst thing, but they do show kind of
Cynical?
an expendable
Okay, yeah.
kind of value to the troops, which is in some senses pretty realistic, but at the same time, we all kind of do value ourselves and our people we're with. Like that's how we feel about ourselves. We're willing to do like they do. We realize the job's dangerous and you might not come home, but we do care about coming home,
It's a priority.
And it's a priority, and they did a really good job of showing that and keeping that like strong in the theme. So
Yeah, I think Tom or Maverick constantly kind of being like, we have to hit these times. You're dead. You're dead.
Yeah.
Like he's constantly reminding him. I mean, the
You get
whole
to tell their
training
family.
montage- yeah,
that part was so cool.
That training montage.
don't tell me. What are you going to tell their family?
Yeah, your wingman's dead. What are you going to tell? Don't tell me your excuse. Is that excuse going to hold up when you tell their family they died under your leadership?
Yeah, and that's like that whole training montage phenomenal as far as that was concerned. I thought it was just so good.
I really enjoyed, and I'm circling back a little bit to the discussion about how competent he was. None of the issues in the movie were due to inability.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the pilots were and for a little bit they're unable to, but they're learning, and so you give them some grace. And then, Maverick the entire time, the problem with him is not that he's unable to do things. He is, he shows it in that scene, and that's why that scene's so powerful, because you're like, this guy can do whatever he wants. He's probably the greatest pilot in the world in this movie. Like, I don't know how you could ever be better, and so it's incredible, and he does such a good job. And I really like that it wasn't that they had these flaws. It wasn't that the characters had these big flaws that was causing the issues. It's that they'd been through things, with Goose dying, and this kid has, his dad dies with his dad's best friend, and he's got this weird relationship, and then the best friend pulls his papers, so he can't be a fighter, so there's all
and he's conservative because his dad died because Maverick was not very conservative, right?
Was borderline reckless.
Yes,
he wasn't
so we see
badly
that,
reckless.
We see that in Rooster a lot, where he's just always a little pulled back. He's always like a little reserved, right?
Yep.
Until the end.
Yeah,
Right.
and so I thought it was cool that it wasn't denigrating to any of the characters.
No.
Rooster had a reason to be conservative, and it was an issue, but you knew why it was, and it's not like he's a loser. It's like, oh, that's a really hard thing to overcome. The stuff Maverick's overcoming is this guilt and this difficulty with this, pilot, this kid that he sees as a kid and everything. So there are these difficult situations that, I've seen so many movies where there's a difficult situation. I'm like, this is difficult because the person is stupid. Like the main character is very dumb, and that is why this situation has happened. But it's not because anyone was dumb. It's not because someone's stupid or a loser. It's because that stuff happens. Bad things happen, and it's been a difficult ride, and they're working really hard to be competent and overcome it with all of their skill. And that was such a cool story to see. And then they succeed.
And you know what else was really cool? I just remembered. He comes back alive. And so many movies would kill him off.
That was my bet. My bet going into this movie was
James Bond just did that back in December.
Can we talk about that decision for a bit?
Well, yeah, that's what I want to talk about, because
don't spoil
he tells
other
her,
movies.
they have this, they have this conversation, him and
The love interest, Penny.
Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah.
And they've dated off and on before, and he keeps, he goes on missions or deploys, and then, they can't continue the relationship. It's too hard. He keeps leaving or going to some other station, and it's, they like each other, but he keeps kind of letting her down because of what he does, but also, but he tells her, I'm going to come back this time, and I'm not going to leave you again. And that line in most other movies would set it up for he's going to die. And
he even says that to his, like, what's the guy?
Yeah.
If
I don't see you again. Yeah. They kind of tease that. Yeah. But I love that he comes back, and it kind of solidifies that competency. Like, he does what he needs to do, and he stays alive. He's not just reckless. Like, that would have been the downfall of the theme to me a little bit, if they just made him so reckless that he has to sacrifice himself to be reckless, but at least he's sacrificing himself while being reckless. But no, he kept his competency up, and to the point where he's successful and he can come home. I mean, he had to be saved at the end, but it was like we said, it wasn't because he really failed at anything. He ran out of ammo. Yeah, right. And all odds were against him, and he was victorious.
Taking down the most advanced fighter. Yeah, and he's taking down the most advanced fighter jets in the world with a gun. Like, the gun on his plane is what he's destroying these things with, and not missiles.
And I just love that ending. I just love that he comes back, and this movie's just uplifting on all fronts. Okay, they didn't and it wouldn't have been the worst thing if they did. It's like every other movie though, and it made me happy.
I love that Mavericks. I'm like, yes, all the Top Guns. Give me more top. Make it like Mission Impossible. I want to see,
well, it's not even for a sequel.
I know, but no, and I liked it. I did think that in this case, if they killed him, it could have been really good too. I don't think it would have been a bad decision to kill him. That was the only moment. Look, I know there's a lot. If anyone's a Navy pilot or a fighter pilot in general, they know there's a lot of silliness in the movie. But as an audience member, it doesn't seem silly. Like, if you actually read about the Top Gun program, most of them are like nerds about airplanes, and flying an airplane is all math. So math people are generally what? Nerds. Right. So that's what a lot of it is. It's not, you don't get a lot of actual Mavericks like Maverick is. So if you're a Navy person, you watch, you're like, yeah, this is kind of silly. But as an audience member, you don't really see that. The only time that it got a little silly, and they could have included one short scene to make it not as silly, was when, he gets hit. And I thought that him getting hit and sacrificing was another show of his competency. Because
he does that,
because he did it
air brake.
Yeah, it was really cool.
He does an incredible move with his plane to save Rooster, and it's like It's not something where it's, oh, sacrifice. It's like, holy cow, he just pulled off an incredible move, hit flares. And so it was tough for me because if they would have killed him in that moment, it would have been his competence and his sacrifice. And I would have been okay with it. It got a little silly almost with both of them getting shot down and both of them being just fine because Rooster ends up getting shot down because he goes back to save Maverick. And they're both shot down, and they're both fine.
When he's like, I did not sacrifice myself so that you could end up down here on the round. What were you thinking? And he's like, you told me not to think.
That's a great conversation.
I'm
willing to forgive it, though, because it got a little silly.
Yeah.
But then they did a great job with it, and there were some awesome moments, and it was really cool. The one thing I would have liked to see, and maybe they included it, I might have seen it. I think I might have seen it. If he ejects right because he knew he was going to get hit.
Yeah.
And there's an earlier scene in the movie where a guy saves his wingman by flying in front of the plane that's locked on. So, there's the plane that's the good guys and they're locked on by the bad guys. And then the pilot earlier in the movie flies in front of the bad guys to take the lock and save the good guys, but then gets killed himself, or in the training, it's, they call it a kill, you're fine. But it would, so they may have done it, but seeing Maverick pull because he knew what he was doing would have been an added thing of cool because it's like he's so competent, he knows how to sacrifice himself, but also survive. And maybe that's what they did. But
let me hit with one more thing. It might make more sense why I think this was better. So it's really hard to have relationships in the military. So that whole conflict they were having what made so much sense to me because every relationship I ever had in the Marine Corps or afterwards when I was still deploying privately failed miserably. And I've watched so many relationships fail because...
Are you talking like friendships or like romantic relationships?
Romantic relationships. Okay. And it's really, really tough. And so that situation they're in, that's really realistic. Like the fact that they were still like on the terms they were was nice to see. And maybe the more realistic thing is them not being able to pull it through, which is why I liked it because it's kind of tragic. And some people make it work and it's always really great and they always have like the best relationships. And so it was really good to see that highlighted versus it not working out because he just can't do it for her. Or them having to kill him. And then it's like every hero has to be a dead hero, in so many movies, it's always a little tragic. So I just really appreciated just the more uplifting message of this can be done. You can do this because it can be done. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's good to do hard things.
Yeah.
So
well, and we see, I mean, that whole ending scene is him and Rooster working on a plane together. So that it's showing them having working on their relationship. And then before we see that scene, Maverick goes back to the bar to try to like go talk to the girl. Like it's the stereotypical one where you're like, he's going to go surprise her at work and they're going to kiss. Right. And then she's just gone. She went on a sailing trip with her daughter, and it's kind of empowering because it's like she wasn't just waiting around for him because she didn't know, and she can't stop her life for a guy, right? Like that's
she's been there before.
Yeah, she knows that that's not healthy for her family, and she also knows that it's not going to do her any good just sitting around waiting to find out if he died or not. So they go on a trip, but then, that last scene is, Rooster and Maverick are working on this plane together, and then all of a sudden he sees the daughter. So it's also cool to see that it's not just some single hot girl. It's like it's the Penny, the love interest has baggage, and they work through it. Like she has a whole daughter, and the daughter's like skeptical. She even calls Maverick out. She's like, "Don't break her heart again."
Yeah.
Which the scene leading up to that's also great.
So funny. But I think it's just good because, like you said, it's them working through hard things. It's not this storybook ending of like her sitting and waiting in the bar for him to show back up, or Rooster just like all of a sudden being like, "Okay, I forgive you." It's like they're working through stuff, and that's more realistic.
Things happened, and that's what caused it. It wasn't just randomly, okay, fine, we're good. It was things happened, and people did things, and that's what led to the rectifying and the resolution of these relationships.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah. It was, and look, I'm happy he survived. I loved that part. I was a little bit like, okay, come on, they're both going to get hit by missiles and be fine.
Yeah.
But it happens, and maybe they both ejected early.
And the hype of the F-14 fight later is totally
worth. I was really afraid in that scene when they meet up in the snow. I was like, oh no, it's going to be some weird like behind enemy lines. Like,
Yeah,
they're going to go real tactical or something. But then he steals an F-14 that's left over in that hangar, and it's like this callback to the original. He's like, I know what to do with this thing.
He's like, I can fly this.
Yeah, it's
Rooster's
so
like,
awesome.
This thing is so
It's a piece
old.
of junk. Like,
He calls
So
it a
great.
museum piece. He's like,
Yeah.
why are we flying a museum piece? And Maverick's like, this is my place. I
Yeah.
got
My
this.
place. I belong here.
yeah.
It was awesome. It
The
was
whole
super
third
cool.
act, all of the fighting, like there's some incredible shots all the way up until they actually go on mission, right? And then it's like the filmmakers just pull out all the stops. It's like they've been training on these like wide open spaces with like virtual training basically of this canyon.
Virtual parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
But then it's like when they show you these shots, which again, as we stated at the beginning of this movie, all of the flying is practical. There's no CGI planes. So they have these pilots actually flying through this canyon at 100 feet or less and shooting up this wall and then rolling over and diving down and doing all of these things. And it's just gorgeous. And then so they complete the run, right? And they do I will say it was very much a Death Star run where it's like they gotta
bit.
shoot the missile into
It was.
the
It
thing.
was. Which was cool.
Totally down for it.
Yeah.
But then they fly up and they're trying to escape, and then it's like literally just surface to air missiles going off everywhere. And it's just
That scene was cool.
You see all these them communicating and they're talking over each other, trying to like keep each other alive. They're like, go. No, I've got you. And they're like, they're talking, and like you feel frantic, right?
Yeah.
Like, they communicated the franticness of if you were getting shot with literally hundreds of surface to air missiles, what would the comms look like? It's not just this like cool collective like do.
Yeah.
It's like people are like yelling and trying to communicate.
Yeah.
And it does this wide shot and you just see all of these missiles and the planes just like flying
That shot.
around and you're like, oh my gosh.
So good. Well, and what I liked about that too, and one thing I liked to go back to, we're talking about some real steak here. I like my steak to be a good steak and not have a bunch of extra pieces that are unnecessary on it. And like we all watched The Batman. I think we saw that one together.
Yes.
Loved that movie. Very good movie. Had a lot of extra pieces on it.
Yes.
This movie I felt was very efficient. I can't, like, if you're like, we need to cut time on this, what scene could we take out? I don't know how many, because
I mean,
every scene was either gorgeous or,
served a purpose for the
it either
plot.
served a purpose or it was just like he crashes or he doesn't crash it. He flies a plane at the beginning. It's a test pilot. That's what he's doing at the beginning of the movie. And he's flying this test plane. He gets to Mach 10 and they're like, stop, that's all you need to do. And then he's like, no, I'm going to keep going. And he keeps
I'm gonna
going.
find my limits.
Yeah, and it destroys the plane because he's going so fast, it burns it up and everything. And it's like that scene is maybe not, you don't need all that time, but also it looks so cool. It's just so fun that it's like, I want to take that out. So I felt like it was a really efficient movie because the extra pieces in there were all really well done, and so everything I was like, what are you going to take out? And so it was efficient. There was no piece I would have wanted to miss. I'm happy I, was able to go through the entire thing because I really need to go to the bathroom halfway through. But I was like, I'm not leaving. And I was rewarded for that. And it was awesome. And I really appreciated that.
I mean, the only thing you could maybe argue was the beach volleyball /
but that's
football.
a
You
classic
can't take that
callback.
out.
But you have to, right? It's like
You have to.
half the ladies in the audience came for the volleyball scene, right? And it's like they do a slight twist on it. It's not just a repeat. They're playing dogfight football or something like that.
Speaking
which
of dogfight
seems
football,
really fun. I don't know what's going on.
They had two
but
footballs. You're on offense and defense at the same time. It's crazy. Did that scene at all? Because they did have they zoomed out a little bit on a couple of the football, what was dogfight football, whatever they called it. I feel like it looked a little bit like that SAM, the surface to air missile when they zoom out and all the planes they look a little similar. And
There's
I
just
felt like
stuff going
it's
around
cool
everywhere.
how they, they built up so many things. And then they have you, is he going to die? Oh, no. Because I didn't want him to die. It would have made sense, but I was like, I don't want him to. And they let him live. It was so good. I really enjoyed it. I loved those decisions that they made. And I loved the foreshadowing pieces. And sometimes foreshadowing is foreshadowing what's going to happen in the story. And sometimes it's just having parallel scenes. Like the dogfight football is crazy and hectic. And you see all these, they zoom out for part of it and all these crazy things are happening. Everyone's going everywhere. And then they zoom out for the plane scene where everyone's flying away and trying to survive and you hear the comms. And it just is so similar. And it's cool how they foreshadow
cinematography
that happening
and
in
plot.
the movie with the cameras.
Well, and just, I mean, obviously it's like an opportunity for Tom to show that he's still ripped. Like,
my
the
gosh.
guy's what?
Very
like,
impressive.
He's got to be in his
59,
60s, and the dude's so jacked.
The contrast between him and Val Kilmer, and they're probably not that far apart in age.
No,
Right.
no.
And Val Kilmer,
shocking.
like, he
Val-
doesn't look terrible, but he doesn't look great. But, like, Tom Cruise, like, running around with his shirt off, and you're like,
Yeah,
dude.
he looks good. I will say, because we saw the preview for Mission Impossible also, and he looks pretty similar.
The new 2-part Mission
Yep,
Impossible.
it's gonna be great.
You walked out in the very beginning, and you missed this. Before the actual movie started, there was a clip of Tom Cruise talking, saying like, "Hey, we've been working on this movie for 10 years. I really hope you enjoy it." And he looks more old in that. He still looks really good,
Yeah.
but you can actually see his age a little bit better in that because he's
Yes.
not done up to be Maverick. You know, his hair is more gray, and you
Right.
could see his like wrinkles on his face more. But the guy's aging pretty great. We could all be blessed to age like that.
Yeah, well, I think he might be using his money to assist with some of his aging.
I
There might be
imagine
some
he
stem
is.
cells involved
Yeah,
or
there's
something.
probably a lot of stuff. But hey, I gotta admit, it's funny because Tom Cruise, he's Scientologist, like personal life is kind of weird and everything, and he's definitely kind of a weirdo. But he's been making awesome movies. The last couple Mission Impossibles have been great, and I can't think of another actor whose sequels get better. Because I thought the original Top Gun's great. I thought this as a movie was a better movie, and the Mission Impossibles kind of number 2, kind of number 3. People weren't as big on, and they've slowly been getting to be really great action movies with good characters and story. So it's
Well,
kind
and
of cool to see that.
you can never say about Tom Cruise that he does not go full tilt on whatever he's doing, right? Like even him running, like the run's a joke, but the man he doesn't fake run. The man runs.
He's a very good runner.
And that's the same thing like he learned in Mission Impossible how to fly a helicopter.
Yeah.
He has his own plane that he flew in the movie. The plane at the end is his.
That's so cool.
It's like
the plane he
knows
flies
how
at
to
the end
fly.
is the civilian version. It's a restored civilian version of a P-51 Mustang, the iconic fighter plane from World War II. And man, it looks so good. Any plane nerds, just go see the movie.
Yeah.
Because the planes are awesome.
It's like the man is dedicated to trying to represent whatever he's doing the best. It's like he's the first civilian ever to do a halo drop. Like that also in Mission Impossible.
in 5,
he
I
did
think, or
that,
6. No,
what
yeah,
is it,
6.
20,000, 2,000?
Oh, he did a Halo drop in real life.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
that's actually
30
him.
something thousand foot
Yeah,
drop.
it's
You
really-
never did those, did you? Okay. That's what, SEAL stuff or whatever? Like,
There might be some Marines who do it at some of the higher, like MARSOC or something, which is like Marines, kind of like special forces, is not the right term, but special operations, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're that higher tier, and they might do that kind of stuff because I know like just recon guys are jump qualified. At least they go to airborne school, and so the higher guys they may employ some of those tactics. I don't know. I don't know any actually. So.
Well, we've got we're gonna wrap up here soon. But are there any final thoughts? Is there anything you would have changed or any different takes on things that were like, well, what if they had done this instead? Thoughts on
No,
that?
but I will concede that in some ways this movie is better than the original. However, I don't know if it'll ever be as iconic as the original.
Probably not.
that's fair. Totally fair.
But and the new movie needs the original to hit home.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
but all the themes we were talking about in the new one, the first one doesn't have so much.
Right.
And this one is really strong in that, which makes it in some ways a better movie. And I mean, to me, you can't separate them. I think they're together now, and they're awesome together.
Yes.
Well, we're probably not going to have more. Like, a Top Gun 3 wouldn't, maybe, but it probably won't have, which means, I don't know, it's really unique to have just a 2 movie thing, and they work together so well. So yeah, I think it's
This
going
is
to be
probably,
awesome.
aside from like trilogies we've had in the past, but like come from stories we know, like Lord of the Rings or something. This might be my favorite sequel ever to a movie, like including like the Matrix. Those sequels are not as good as I
Right.
thought this was a fantastic sequel. When sequels get justifiably crapped on because they do fall so short a lot of the time. They
That's really hard to-
kind of capitalizing on the success of the original that was popular. And it's like, how can we milk this story for more money or whatever, and get butts in seats. But this was great. Everyone should go see this movie. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, and I guess one question would be, is this worth going to the theater to see?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Planes
We
flying.
didn't even, well, and it's like, I can't even imagine, we were in a theater that the sound system wasn't like the best sound system that the theater
We were in
had.
one of the smaller rooms.
One of the smaller ones. So it's like you could still feel everything, but I bet if you were in like an IMAX
I wanna go to,
or
like, a
in
nice-
a Dolby Atmos
Yeah,
one.
one of
and
those, man.
You just hear those thrusters like
You're gonna feel it.
Yeah.
You're gonna
Unless
be
you're
shaking.
blessed with a really nice home theater, go
But I
see
wouldn't
it.
wait that long. I would
I
go
mean,
see it
it's
sooner.
good enough. You want to see it now, you know.
Yeah.
And it's. I think it's a Paramount movie. So
maybe.
But if
Or
it's a Paramount movie, you
Sony,
got to
I
have
think, helped
Paramount
too.
Plus anyway, which is $10 a month,
Yeah.
$5 or $10 a month. So just go see it in the theater. It's an awesome movie. It's one of those movies that you want to be like, good job, Hollywood.
Well,
we
and
want to pay you money.
Yeah, and it's like you feel good afterwards, right? Like
Yeah.
that was the thing.
I
is
felt great.
Chase, it's like
awesome.
You feel amped up. You feel encouraged. Like
Yeah.
it's a very different take for Hollywood.
I felt very happy. Just a lot of good stuff. It was.
Yeah.
I loved how. I mean, if we're doing last takes, I did love how at the end he goes back to her. You know, and that's kind of. He's not going to be flying anymore. That implies that he's kind of done, right? Like if
He's done
He let it go.
you know, he wants to be on this mission the entire movie. You know, there's this super dangerous mission. That's what they do. That's what they're training for. And he wants to be on it. And he finally gets on it. He flies, but it kind of hurts his relationship with his love interest. And then when he goes back, it's kind of implying, you know, he's working on his own plane and stuff. It's like kind of implying that he's done, which is a great, I think that for just about any hero, just about any person, you know, I think
has a
what is
new
it?
mission.
95% of people in history, in the world history, have gotten married or something. Like marriage is a good next step, and that's part of continuing your journey and your adventure. And so to see him be like, okay, we're going to let this go, and we're going to go to this step, even though he's older, I think that's really cool. And it makes me appreciate that character more because we want to see our characters progress.
Yeah.
You know, you made that point about competence, and so he's continually progressing.
Yeah, and I think it speaks really well to how valuable it is to be a mentor and how rewarding it can be, especially if like his character, you are really stuck and you don't want to let go because it's your passion or it is who you are, but you are kind of at the end and you watch him kind of become fulfilled through mentoring these young pilots who are good, and you've just showed him how to be a little bit better, and you're comfortable leaving them with the torch, you know, the metaphorical torch passing. And it was a great example of that. Just kind of the next generation coming, the older generation passing on what they know, passing their knowledge and their wisdom, and then being able to leave on good terms, satisfied with what they've accomplished.
And it's supposed to
and
be
how
that way.
they've left the next generation, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in the future we're going to have a segment where we kind of do like devil's advocate on ideas or philosophies. But I mean, like this movie
was pretty hard. I think we all
so
just
good that I'm like, I
I
don't know
don't
what I
have
would,
anything. The only thing was if they would have killed him off. But I think Chase made great points.
Yeah,
I'm like,
you guys kinda
I'm
talked about
happier
it.
that they didn't. So
I mean, I think it could have worked, but at the same time, I don't think it needed to. Like that was the expectation, which I almost was glad I was wrong about. Like, because I thought this was going to be like a Guardian 2.0. Did you guys ever watch The Guardian with Kevin Costner?
Yeah.
That was my assumption. Is
That's what I mean. They always
Maverick goes to
kinda
mentor,
die.
Yeah.
and then he has to sacrifice himself. And I was like, as soon as he goes to save Rooster, I'm like, okay, he's dead. We'll have a very sad scene where the love interest is crying and Rooster's crying, and we're done. And it's like, no.
yeah.
I mean, granted, I don't think I've ever seen Tom Cruise die in a movie, so it's like
That's a great example of a movie though, because remember that movie Kevin Costner, didn't he have like a failed marriage because of what he was doing?
He had
couldn't give it up.
he
He
had a
couldn't
lot
give
of
it up.
difficulties. He had
And
a lot of flaws.
He just kind of tragically dies doing what he's passionate about, but it's tragic because it's cost him a marriage.
he can't give it up.
He can't give it
Yeah.
up, and it's cost him a marriage. It's not a message I would want to like pass on to people to show them, you know.
Well, it's a fair story.
fullness, right?
And that's
No,
that's
great
what the
movie, a
Northman
great
is.
story.
You have to have stories like that show what happens if you don't give it up.
Yeah, and sacrifice is not something to be shamed. I mean, there's great value in sacrifice and meaning to it. It's just it's more of like my general criticism of like Hollywood tactics
Well,
and
Guardian wasn't
their
as good in
and their
general.
messaging.
It wasn't as good of a movie, and that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why they didn't nail that sacrifice. But anyway,
Well,
you
and
know,
I think like Chase is saying,
It's showing him how he had to be like kind of broken, you know, like they couldn't also have him just have a good marriage. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they stack all these things.
well, he couldn't be fully competent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we see that it's that final thing. It's like Val Kilmer's saying, you got to let it go. And it's a theme that you think is only related to Rooster, right? Like he's talking about, you got to let Rooster fly. You got to let him be free and stuff. But it's like, he's also kind of like, you're still a captain. You're still trying to get these missions. You're still trying to go out and do these things. And he's like, you got to let it go, man. Like you got to move on to the next step. And it's like Val Kilmer has a whole family, and you see all these photos of his kids. His kids are out in the back playing, and yes, he's fighting cancer, but he's still he's got the balance, right? And that's one of the things Maverick has to learn is like, okay, I've got to stop putting myself in these crazy situations if I really want to be with this woman who I keep going back to over and over.
Have a rich life that's full, because you can't do that forever. And then if you ignore it, what are you left with when it's done?
Yeah.
You know, depression, alcoholism, you know, it's like, and the movie did not leave you with that.
Right.
It was awesome.
He matured.
So
and that was great to see.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed this second episode of Real Steak. We dove into a fantastic movie, and I kind of was very pleasantly surprised. I didn't think it was going to be bad, but I didn't think I was going to love it this much. And I mean, this podcast is almost a little harder because all I want to do is gush about how great this movie is. So.
The only hot take I have is go see it multiple times.
Yes, go to see it multiple times.
USDA Prime.
Amen.
USDA
Ribeye.
Yep.
Love it. All of the things you want. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode of Real Steak.